Welcome to the State of Aesthetics podcast. I'm your host, Austin Podolsky, a medtech entrepreneur with over a decade of acquisition, liquidation, and development of the latest technology applied to the fields of plastic surgery, dermatology, and med spas. We're here to give you a look behind the curtain at industry insights, crack down on the manufacture, the business of aesthetics, and the technology that fuels results. This is the State of Aesthetics podcast. First, a word from our sponsors. Technology moves fast, Synergy Med Sales moves faster. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking to expand your menu of services, I encourage you to check out their marketplace as it pertains to a wide array of technology offered by top-tier manufacturers in the space at up to 60 and 80% discounts from manufacturer's pricing. Synergy Med Sales is the resource for you, offering consulting services, training, service, and support. If you're looking for a great deal on a certified pre-owned laser, it's Synergy. Shop them now. Do you know how to sell? Do your providers know how to sell? Can't sit in every consult? I'm talking about Optic Slim Advanced Aesthetic Imaging, the simplest way to standardize the consult. Before and afters have never been more important to the aesthetic practice. Use UV, polarize, and standard flash to document results, retain patients, and upsell products and services. Check out opticslim.com and schedule a demo. If you have a product that is no longer generating income for your business, there's no better a time to sell than now. Check out medxtrade.com for a fast, easy, and seamless appraisal process to remove that asset from your balance sheet. I'm talking cash offers, consignment, and trade up. medxtrade.com. Welcome to the State of Aesthetics podcast. I am your host, Austin Podolsky, coming to you live from Dallas, Texas, in my home office. I am a medtech entrepreneur based out of Dallas, Texas. I've been working in the space of aesthetics for about 10 years now. Our guest today is Dr. Ben Tittle, a board-certified plastic surgeon, also operating out of Dallas, Texas. Been in the game for some time, beautifying people all over the world, not just in Dallas. Before I get on to a more in-depth intro for Dr. Tittle, I wanted to shout out to some of our sponsors. So Synergy Med Sales is sponsoring this podcast. Synergy Med Sales is a preferred source in the sale of pre-owned capital equipment. So you can check them out at www.synergymedsales.com. Go to the inventory tab and you can see the latest and greatest savings and specials for pre-owned aesthetic equipment from top-tier manufacturers like InMode, Cutera, BTL. I think they just listed a BTL M-Sculpt. If you're on the hunt for a new muscle toning device, that's all the rage right now. So check out Synergy Med Sales. They are, again, a fantastic resource for sales, training, as well as the liquidation of any asset that you may no longer be utilizing. Another sponsor we have today is Astea Imaging. Astea is a new company pioneering 3D holographic before and after imaging. You can check Astea out at asteaimaging.com. That's AESTHEIA imaging.com. Astea is going to be dropping an app here in June that will be very pivotal to helping you increase patient revenue with the decreased patient volume that you may experience after COVID, as far as engaging them with 3D interactive content during waiting room wait times instead of engaging with their cell phones, as well as a very intricate before and after system that is very easy to use, one-click 3D before and after capturing projected into hologram or on any flat screen. So check them out as well. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Again, my name is Austin Podolsky. I will be your host. This is the State of Aesthetics, and today we have Dr. Tittle. Dr. Tittle, you're a Texas boy from small town Texas. Tell me about yourself a little bit.
Grew up in East Texas, Austin. Went to college at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches, and then moved to Dallas and to go to med school. Then I did an internal medicine internship at Baylor, and then did 5 years of general surgery at Parkland and then 3 years of plastic surgery residency at Parkland as well. So lots of training, and then I went into private practice in Dallas in 1990.
Okay, so before we unpack the revolution of aesthetics and its grow from the early 80s, late 80s to today, I wanted to understand more about what pulled you personally into cosmetic surgery. So you went to SFA for your undergrad, then you did a medical program at UT Southwestern. Once you completed that, you did an internship at Baylor, then you went into residency at Parkland. So that was reconstructive surgery. I mean, what was that like? Were you in the ER, the O? I mean, what were you doing?
That was general surgery, trauma surgery.
Surgery.
Yeah. So that was everything from hernias, gallbladders, gunshot wounds, trauma, car wrecks, everything. Dallas Parkland Hospital is a very, very, very busy trauma center. So you get an enormous amount of training in trauma, in general surgery. Probably one of the best places to train in general surgery in the whole United States.
Wow. And so high volume, very traumatic events. I mean, you're on your toes 18 hours a day.
Yeah, you would be on call. You basically were on call every third day. So you'd stay in the hospital usually for a day and a half, and then go home, get back up, do it again.
And so having those experiences, and whether it was life-saving or it was, I guess, for lack of a better term, appearance-saving, that really helped you hone your skill sets as it pertains to moving into cosmetics. What made you want to move away from trauma and into cosmetic surgery or reconstructive surgery in the way of plastics?
Yeah, plastic and reconstructive surgery it's very unique. It's something different every day. It's artistic. It's fun. A lot of it, depending on what you're doing. Now I do strictly aesthetic surgery, but for the first 15 years of my practice, I did a blend of aesthetic and reconstructive surgery, everything from lower extremity reconstruction to, breast reconstruction, and then all of the other things, everything from eyelid surgery, facelifts, tummy tucks, breast augmentation. Now, I've transitioned. That's my entire practice now is aesthetic surgery and aesthetic treatments too, because in the late 90s, lasers came out, Botox, fillers, pretty much changed the landscape forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's unpack that a little bit more. So a guy in his mid-30s, if you don't know Dr. Ben Tittle, he's like 6'5", very handsome guy. I'd call him a plastic surgery vampire because he hasn't aged a day past 40. God, it had to have been a Mr. T with the ladies situation in the late 80s in Dallas. I mean, we're talking about the era of the SMU football scandal, the Cowboys in their heyday, and all of this was depicted in Dallas's JR, right, in his gang. So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like being a cosmetic surgeon starting out in Dallas, Texas in the late 80s?
Well, Dallas is it's a very image conscious city. It's unique in some ways because we're in the South, but everybody wants to look good. But this Dallas has a very positive image conscious kind of aura to it that is wonderful. Women dress up to go to the grocery store, which is a great thing. Everybody wants to look as good as they can. So, I practiced here and only know what it's like here. I practiced in Colorado for a year, but that was a different kind of environment completely. Dallas it's a wonderful thing. People care about what they look like, which is great. You look good, you feel good.
That's right. Absolutely. After you got going, obviously we kind of started to move into .com. And then there was a little bit of a bust there. Then we went into 2008, which was a total economic crash, right? Many people lost their homes, bank bailouts, etc. At that time, from what I understand, the people that have mentored me, that I've interviewed with, I've trained under, etc., aesthetics was considered kind of recession proof, if you will, during 2008. And you had a big insurgence of minimally invasive devices and technologies, hitting the ground here. From .com to 2008, I guess, Botox, injections, filler, toxin, right? That was the craze. And you're balancing that between implants, lipo. 2008 hits, everybody's belly up, people lose their homes, but your practice grows. Tell me about that.
Yeah, then we had the technology to do non-invasive things that we didn't have. You're right. The .com crash followed by 9/11. That was harder because people not necessarily will always have surgery in times of uncertainty, but they're more likely to do non-invasive treatments, which is a very good thing because we have effective non-invasive treatments now that are available that less downtime, less expensive, can be done in stages. Whereas in 9/11 and the dot-com crash was much of an option then. But surgery slowed down for obvious reasons because they were obviously worried about not being able to pay their mortgage. And so in the real estate crash, there were at least options that didn't involve as much downtime, Botox, fillers, non-invasive devices. And there's even more of those now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, without question. I mean, it's a big surgery. So before we get into kind of understanding the ratio of how much time you spend in the OR now to how much time you spend consulting or looking over patient charts with your laser technicians, what was the first aesthetic device that you actually acquired or had in the practice?
I got a hair removal laser in like 1995.
Okay.
It was a ruby laser.
Okay.
The first FDA approved lasers from Harvard. And it was
they were
huge.
using ruby to do hair removal? What?
Yeah, it works. It's just slow.
The 694 nanometer for hair removal?
Yeah, it was as big as an aircraft carrier.
Okay. Okay.
It was cool. It was slow. It's what we know. It was 25 years ago or longer. And, at the time it took to do somebody's back, to remove hair from them was just painfully slow. So, obviously now devices are, 30 times faster and they're the size of a vacuum cleaner.
Sure.
And less expensive, safer. Although the ruby laser was safe, it just, you had to go really slow.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had already started working with aesthetic technologies or energy-based, laser-based devices up and before, any major recession there. After that recession hit, how did your patients take on this insurgence of non-invasive, and how did you sell that, incorporate that into your business? I would assume that the revenue on breast implant versus a hair removal, 6-session treatment is much higher revenue, which I would assume is much higher margin. So you had to implement these devices, carry high volume. It allowed you to outsource your time to a laser technician so that you could spend your time in the OR. But how did patients feel about non-invasive compared to, quote unquote, being under the knife?
Well, it depends on their goals. And people, they'll mix non-invasive and surgical, or some people just want surgery. Some people want non-invasive. And then now we can offer that to them. The first laser I got was an Erbium laser, probably 97 and in that range. A lot of interest in that, a lot. And then late 90s, I believe I got endermology for cellulite.
Yeah.
Oh, huge interest in that.
Yeah.
It's just now the processor speed is so much faster. Devices are they're smaller. They have, the ability to go faster. The amount of growth in technology has certainly benefited non-invasive cosmetic treatments.
Now, do you do blethrol? Do you do eyes?
Yes, I do lots of eyes.
Do you ever use a CO2 or incorporate a laser into that surgical procedure?
Not to make the incisions, but I will do lower eyelids where I just take out the fat pads and then I use my CO2 laser on their lower lids to tighten the skin. So you can do both. You're
a Syneron core user, right?
Yes.
For CO2? Yeah, fantastic device.
Yes.
Speaking of Syneron, the Profound, you're getting amazing results, whereas before you might have somebody come in to address a neck lift or do a facelift, and you're able to move them away from actually that invasive procedure and longer time on your part, being in the OR and aftercare, et cetera, into the Profound. How have the results been? How's the practice shifted? How do you like your time out of the OR in comparison?
Well, I enjoy all aspects of it. It's a very positive specialty. So Profound has been out for a long time, but now it's come to market and is basically I've had it I think for 4 or 5 years, and it's for the patient that doesn't want to have surgery but wants to have a result. And there's downtime with it. There's certainly I can combine Profound with CO2. I can do Profound with face type, because aging is multifactorial. So you can use multiple devices to treat people, which is a great fillers, lasers, radio frequency.
We're leveling and doing combination therapies, multimodality to get to the end result and get to it, more effectively or
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So that's the key now is using different kinds of energy to affect different layers of aging, and you can get, with your name, synergy. You can get a wonderful synergy from using laser-based device versus radio frequency-based device.
And so how do you determine when you're working with a potential, patient, how do you determine who is a candidate for surgery versus who's a candidate for laser? Is it strictly on price, budget? Is it on timeline, et cetera?
Yeah, everybody's different. So some people will come to me and tell me straight up, I'm never going to have surgery. I want to know all the options. Or they're, 49 years old. They don't need surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're 72 and they come in and they're like, I want a facelift.
Mm-hmm.
And that's reasonable. But, the middle ground, I have people that come in and they'll tell you, okay, this is what bothers me. I don't want to have surgery. And what are my options? And so used to, that was a very short conversation. In 2001, short conversation. There isn't an option, surgery.
Mm-hmm. For any of you that just tuned in, again, I'm Austin Podolsky with Synergy Med Sales, Aesthetic Imaging. I've got the fabulous Dr. Ben Tittle with the Plastic Surgery of Texas here with me live on Instagram. We're also recording the State of Aesthetics podcast, episode 1. We're going to be covering the revolution, the recessions, and the Americana of med spa startups. As we get back into this, I wanted to kind of understand what's happening and what you're seeing and learning amongst your colleagues right now, on the East and on the West Coast, as well as here centrally, that are dealing with COVID and how they're strategizing and how they're combating that to ensure that revenue is still coming through the door, but also their patients are getting the aftercare that they needed for, recent surgeries that were performed or recent, CO2 peels that were performed, et cetera. What's the beat on the street? What are you hearing from the physician community?
So it depends on the state, but Texas, basically said all non-emergent medical procedures had to cease. But you can see your patients after surgery, which I am seeing. They need to be seen. Mm-hmm. But from the standpoint of treating people electively, you can't do that. And every state's different, but pretty much every state has the same policy about using medical supplies and things in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty will ease with time as they get a handle on it.
Yeah, I guess Governor Abbott has just released a notification that he's going to be doing kind of this phase out plan to re-entry for Texas here. I saw in the article that I read this afternoon that he was going to allow for some elective care as necessary and if supplies are readily available. So hopefully that means some practices will be opening and hopefully patients will be wanting to come back out. As we move into downturns and recessions, we talked a little bit about the revolution. We talked about the uprise of aesthetics, starting from reconstructive surgery, similar to your journey. I mean, the industry had a similar journey. I mean, we started reconstructive surgery on battle wounds from World War II before this really morphed, right? And so, you having a similar background in reconstructive, moving into cosmetics, we talked about breast and lipo to interjecting that with filler and toxins and then moving into some devices. So that's really kind of been the revolution and the evolution of this very, very young industry. I mean, we're talking 3-decade-old industry as it pertains to aesthetics as a whole, encompassing devices and injections on top of surgery. So let's go back to some of the recessions and talk about 2008. What was different about 2008 that's different from today? I mean, from what I see, before you could go out and you could go to the bar, you could socialize, and you could get your drink. By the way, this is a virtual happy hour, so make sure, it's Friday, 5 o'clock somewhere. But you could go out, you could socialize, right? You could have a drink and you could get your Botox. Now we can't leave our homes. How else is this different? And how do you think this is going to impact us, or how has it impacted, your patients and your business?
So 2008 was a clear financial crisis, and this is a healthcare. This is a pandemic, and a lot of it is still unknown. Basically, the ability for us to treat people is going to depend on what happens when you start to open back up. If that works fine, then we'll move right along. If it doesn't, if you get enough spike in cases, then they'll have to reevaluate. A lot of it, this has not happened since in the United States since 1918 at this level.
Spanish flu.
Yeah, Spanish flu. Mm-hmm. So how this affects everything, because what Abbott said was that you can open a retail store, but you have to bring whatever they order to their car. They can't come in the store.
Curbside.
So, yeah, curbside. You can't do Botox. Yeah.
No. We could talk about opening Sonic med spas, where, you can just drive up, press the button, pick the menu, and then bring them out, right? Okay, so how do you feel about the teleconsult? Obviously, telemedicine has been prevalent in primary care physician practices and in dermatology for a while. But, now we're seeing this spike and this rise of plastic surgeons as well as med spas doing the teleconsult. As far as I'm concerned, there's little you can do with a scalpel or a device, a handpiece, and a needle through the phone. So, other than retail being, an important silo of your business right now, how do you feel about the teleconsult? Is there a way to make it effective? Are you vetting patients properly to put them on the books for forward revenue? I mean, what does that actually mean?
So normally, teleconferencing works for people that live out of town so they can meet you.
Mm-hmm.
Because to evaluate somebody for an abdominoplasty or a breast lift or liposuction, you need to see them and examine them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way that you can evaluate their skin elasticity, what their overall physique is. And so that telemedicine is, fine if you're trying to evaluate somebody that's got fever and not sure if they have coronavirus or not. But for trying to decide about if somebody needs liposuction versus body type versus an abdominoplasty, or, all modalities to tighten the abdomen or to treat the abdomen, that's something you have to do in person. You can talk to them,
Mm-hmm.
You can explain all that to them. And I've been doing that for a while. I mean, somebody from Amarillo, Texas, that they want to meet me and they want to ask me questions. That is a great way to find out, if you can, if you want to work with somebody or not, or, or Oklahoma or Louisiana or New Mexico. Those are the places that I, will do that for, just simply because they want to talk to you first before they come all that way. But
Sure.
Now doing that for somebody in Dallas, I mean, you can do it, but for you to be able to adequately evaluate them, you need to have them come in, and so you can be in front of them, so you can examine them.
Yeah, so too bad we're not in the dating business, because we could launch a tele-dating service and maybe doing a little bit better right now, huh? Let's kind of elaborate a little bit more. How important are retail sales? Is it sustainable revenue if you're seeing a peak or a rise in retail sales right now? And what do you think a good practice can count on as far as top line as it pertains to the revenue that they're able to produce from skincare?
Yeah, skincare is, people trust me. They come to visit me. They want to get feedback on what they should use. But a lot of that's icing on the cake. I mean, I do sell a lot of skincare products, but they're in conjunction with other treatments that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we have mailed out a lot of skincare, but less than we normally do, just simply because.
Oh, really?
Oh,
The care packages aren't increasing in this downtime. They've actually decreased because you don't have the ability to put the product in their hands, show them the result, and sell them or cross-sell them across various products. Or why is that?
Well, I think, people aren't able to come in and look at all their options and talk to you. But yes, I have mailed out, a fair amount of it, just simply because people want to keep up their regimens. They don't want to go through all this and lose the gains that they've gotten by doing skincare. So not to say that people aren't interested in it. It's just, it's a part of a practice. It's a smaller part of the pie, but that's what we do. We want to be sure people look as good as they can. It's just, it would be much better if they had, obviously if they're in front of you.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of practices doing or moving to offering an antibody test and then using that to put a focus on regenerative medicine as a new revenue center for their business or a new silo of their business, getting into more advanced PRP or stem cell, et cetera. How do you feel about regenerative medicine? Do you think that's going to become a core value and main menu of service for most aesthetic practices out there right now? Because I know we have the A4M conference and whatnot, and most people do PRP through microneedling, but not a lot of people are doing stem cell today. And not a lot of people are looking even at exomes, which are so new, et cetera. So does regenerative become a new part of aesthetics in a bigger way because of COVID and through antibody testing? And how do you feel about your colleagues or your competitors trying to enlist patients kind of with a duck and weave of come in for a COVID test? By the way, let me cross-sell you over here, on an aesthetic treatment.
Yeah, I'm going to leave all of that to the primary care delivery.
Hmm.
That I think is, there's a complexity to that. So just because you test positive to the antibody doesn't mean that you have active immunity. You have to have a certain level. I think the level is 640. So there are tests that are done just to see if you've had the disease. There's IgA, IgG, IgM, and those are all different phases of when, how long it's been since you've had the disease. But then you have to do a quantitative test to find out the level of antibodies that somebody has. And actually, I don't think anybody really is totally prepared for that yet. They're trying to get prepared for it, but that's not something I think I would be entering into. Yes, I do. We don't call them stem cells. We call them pluripotent cells
Okay.
because of the way the FDA classifies them. And yes, we do them, but we do them all based on the science that we know mainly for hair growth and combine it with PRP.
Okay.
But antibody testing is a complex issue from the standpoint of, is it going to be protective from the standpoint of what level of antibodies you need to have and how long will those antibodies last?
Hmm.
That's something I think that should be taken care of by primary care physicians.
Absolutely. And so outside of trying to get into antibody testing or trying to increase the menu of services around your regenerative right now, what else are you seeing colleagues do to produce revenue? And what are you hearing is the plan for reentry now that we've got some hope, we've got some light to look at here in the next coming weeks, and some practices are probably immediately going to open because they need to see these patients and get that revenue through the door and keep those gains, as you mentioned, ongoing. As with anything, scan, if we're not continually, doing that preventative maintenance, we are going to lose that result. So what are you hearing right now as far as what's the plan to get back to work?
Yeah, I think that's going to depend on the general response that you get. If you get spikes again, then you're going to go back into, they're going to have to relook at everything. It depends. It depends on what Mother Nature does to us. That depends on, like the number of cases in New York City is different than the number of cases in Wyoming. It's just, it kind of depends on where you are, the population density that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this is going to depend on Mother Nature and how she reacts.
We had 2 consults this week with clients in New York that actually had the virus and contracted the virus a month ago. Now they're fine and well. They were not hospitalized. They were not put on ventilators. They've both individually and their families, friends, employees have tested in good health and with antibody. And they've actually reported back to us that New York is not the ghost town that you may hear on the media. There are people still getting out, whether it's a speakeasy style restaurant opening that's secret and 200 people show up, or it's just people on the street. I think commuting, the traffic in and out has been a little bit more of a breeze, if you will. But I'm hearing that the lockdown there, the self-quarantining, not at the high highs as we've heard on the media. So I found that to be really interesting as far as the fact that they've had this virus, a month past, and they're sitting there in New York ready to get back to work. And it sounds like they're moving around a little bit more than expected. So you've MD'd for a lot of med spas as far as being the medical director. And that's a service that, many medical directors can do here in Texas based on our specific state regulation. Not all states allow for you to go and list a medical director, have them reviewing patient charts, and allow you administering treatment. You've been able to do that here in Texas for a few select primary and premier med spas. And with this recent surgency of med spa entrepreneur or med spa startup in the industry, which was incredibly booming. I mean, for us, we're in the device sales business, but we also consult because we have an unbiased opinion to the consumer or to the practice owner from the standpoint that I don't sell one line from one manufacturer. I can give you an objective viewpoint on multiple. And a lot of med spa startup entrepreneurs were coming to us to build out their practices. And it was really at an all-time high. I think in 2019, the stat was that Texas had actually surpassed New York in a square mile of openings of med spa, which is incredible, right? Having your experience, MD, for med spas that are starting, and knowing of the surgence of med spas and how they're literally opening almost on every corner, do you think that will decline? Do you think that they can sustain? Is there still an ability for people to get in and start in this business if they weren't pre-existing, or is it just the elite, right? Is it just plastic surgeons? And I think there's been the age-old war, like actual cosmetic surgeons, actual plastic surgeons that are running, med spas have wanted to keep out DOs and primary care physicians from getting into lipo, or derms from doing breast implants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think it's the elite that will rise and everybody else is going to go out of business? And I know they fought for regulation in the past. Do you think this is a stepping stone for them to be able to do that? What's your thought process there?
Yeah, Texas has, started to make it where at least you need to have a nurse practitioner on site to see all new patients, which we do. And then the business side of it is going to depend on how fast this comes back, who survives, because like every business, American Airlines survives on cash flow. Do all medium and small sized businesses. It just depends on how long this persists and what kind of cash flow or what kind of savings they had. And I think this will be across the board. You can apply all the same questions you just had to a little chain of coffee shops or, clothing stores. It depends on how fast the business comes back, how much blowback you get from, a recurrence, if that were to happen. And then also, no one knows how the consumer in 2008, 9, 10, the consumer was basically out of the game because you're not going to go buy, or less likely to go buy, a new truck if you're worried about paying your rent. Well, the same thing now, because of all of the job losses and the unknown is, when will people fly again? When will people come? It may be that offices have to schedule appointments where they only have 2 people an hour. I've thought about all of those kind of things. So that's probably the way it'll be at first. And then also the governor has said that if you leave your house, supposedly, you're supposed to, if you go to a public place, you're supposed to have a face mask on. That's incredible.
Hinging off of less patients, right? Lower procedure volume or fewer procedure volume. Let's talk Wall Street. From a Wall Street perspective, you've got a lot of big and larger commercial businesses that have entered the medical aesthetics realm and grown vastly over the past 15 years. Very few are still private. Most are publicly traded companies today. How do you think this affects big business, these large commercial players, that had previously skyrocketing valuations before we hit this, this downturn?
Yeah, it depends on how well capitalized they are. Once again, it depends on how much they need cash flow. And their smaller companies may not have that. And then new device sales may drop. People may, just like they did in 2009, 10, 11, and 12, they went to buy used devices. And there are companies that went out of business that were unable to keep their doors open because they couldn't sell enough of whatever they had, be it filler or devices, because the consumer, whoever that is, starts to react out of, everybody wants to be sure that they can pay their basic bills first. And
how does that affect, Abu Dhabi, who just recently acquired Galderma, right, for what, $10 billion? How does that affect Abby, who's in the middle of a transaction for $63 billion for Allergan? What happens to those behemoths?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there'll be any retrading going on, but AbbVie's buying Allergan because their patent for their flagship drug is going away in 2021, and they get cash flow. They're using it for that, and so that's probably a well thought through plan
until the pandemic hit, right?
True there, but they still have a fair amount of it's not like they're cash poor. It's just that no one could have foreseen this coming to the level that it is. And, I've read some estimates that 30% of businesses will go out of business across the board for a lot of different reasons. Basically, because the consumer on all levels is going to rethink what they do, layered on top of, do I want to fly and risk, health problems from doing that?
So are we going to see Hologic style dumps, from the standpoint, what they bought Cynosure for 1.6, billion, dumped it for $200 million? I mean, 75% plus loss, or are we going to see that happen across the board?
Well, I think that was, buying a different kind of into a different space than what you're used to doing. And that happens not infrequently.
I mean, that's classic M&A for our space, right? Like, is that going to be the trend?
Well, there may be companies that get bought because they need capital.
Yeah. I guess your legacy portfolio companies that are still out there, which, Luminous, Alma, that's APAC, heavily owned right now from an investment standpoint. I don't know if they're relying on the growing economy there in China from the standpoint of procedures performed, popularity of aesthetics there, because it's just a massive market. But then you have, the new kids on the block. What's going to happen to InMode, formerly Invasix? What's going to happen to Revance? What's going to happen to Evolus, right? I mean, those are stocks that I'm trading. Those are stocks that I'm watching. And they've got great leadership. I mean, they've got great executive players, at the helm there that have had, decades of success in this space. When you're relying on consumable revenue and it's not just about the box sale, you take the box sale away for the rest of 2020, right?
Yep.
Lower patient volume, fewer procedures. That here's your consumable sale. What's going to happen? I mean, what's going to happen to these guys? Maybe it is buyout, but I don't think we've seen a good M&A situation happen yet. I mean, Thermi was a beautiful business, right? What happened there? Third owner now. You know what I mean?
Same thing, bought by a Spanish company that didn't completely understand the space. And all the companies that you mentioned, the mid-level companies, smaller level companies, it depends on how much gas they have in their tanks. That's it. That's what it's going to depend on.
Okay, I digress off of Wall Street. If you guys have any other questions, we are not stockbrokers. We are not trading. I do not have a Series 6. Neither does my good friend, Dr. Tittle. You could tune out that part of the podcast if you want. At the end of this segment, really what I want to break down is what I feel is the Americana of med and what makes, and of cosmetic surgery practices, plastic surgery offices, dermatology offices, what makes this, so American. Not literally American, but from a global scale, there's really the Americana spirit of build something from nothing. And this very young, again, 3 decades old in healthcare, great CAGR, probably one of the fastest growing segmentations of healthcare, but it was built off of creativity and hard work. Is that American dream still alive at the end of this? If we are going to see such a downturn in the way we've done business up until this point, you're quite successful and probably in a position to retire if you wanted to, but you keep going. I mean, you're a worker. I think Dr. Tittle, just so you know, I think if I called him at 11, 2, 4, 4, 9, he's going to answer. I mean, he's a beast. And he's like, oh, I'm in the OR. Yeah. I got to go. I got a patient on the table, Austin. Call you back. And he always calls you back. But like, that's probably been the most enjoyable thing for me about working in this space is working with plastic surgeons from the standpoint that you guys are animals. Beast. You guys just work so hard.
It's not work if you love it. It's not work.
Well, so that's my question, right? Is the American dream of the med spa dead after COVID? And for you, you're still going. So what's the plan of attack? And what would you recommend to these newcomers, right? To these new med spa entrepreneurs that have a dream, as well as to these guys coming out of medical programs, going into residency, coming out of residency, that have devoted themselves and their specialty to plastics instead of going into the trauma route or the reconstructive route?
Well, everybody's going to be patient with all of this. The sun comes up every day, but it doesn't come up in a situation like this, and is not in our lifetimes. And so everybody's going to have to realize that they're going to have to be persistent and patient and realize that people want to look good, but like after 9/11, I've been doing this for 30 something years, that the tide goes in, the tide goes out. But with something like this, it's a health issue. You're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to realize that things are going to return, but they're going to return in a sawtooth fashion. And so that is to be expected from something like this. Everybody's going to have to, from top down, everybody's trying to figure out how do you reopen an economy in the middle of something that serious health risk to it. So they're doing the best they can. I realize that. So if we didn't open weren't able to do face-to-face close things for a few more weeks, I would understand that completely. They just want to be sure that, you're not spreading this as much as possible.
I follow Brent Saunders. I think he's fantastic, and obviously CEO of Allergan. Great career path there, and done wonders with that company. Some of his actual Instagram posts it's not propaganda media, but it's like he's questionful of reentry almost in the way that he's posting right now, talking about, we don't know enough about antibiotics. I just find that extremely interesting. I mean, that's probably one of the only companies that hasn't seen a furlough or a layoff yet, and is in the middle again of a $63 billion deal.
Right.
And so I think it's pretty profound that he has that mindset going. I think he's also absolutely right. I like the ability of getting back to work. I like the ability of bringing my staff, my team back in one place, because that's where we work. But it's got to be safe. It's got to be secure. I mean, I don't want to be stuck at home again.
Yeah, or longer.
I've learned a lot of skills, man. I can hold. There's like probably nothing that I can't do holding a baby right now, like hands free. Not mind powers hold. I wear the strap. Modern dads now, like they're a lot more hands on. So my wife's got me this like anger. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a Joey. I don't know. It's like I look like the Unabomber with my baby strapped to me instead of a bomb.
Better to have a baby. No, it's better to have a baby than a bomb strapped to you.
Hey.
No, but you're adapting. Man. You're adapting, Austin, just like everybody. You have to adapt. We're just going to have to adapt through this the best we can. That's important. And it'll be fine. It just won't be fine maybe tomorrow. And it'll gradually recur. Like I say, there are going to be some areas that have recrudescences of this. And, they'll have to figure out how to handle that. And that's a whole nother discussion there. That's an hour-long discussion.
Well, we'll have to have you on again. I really greatly appreciate you being the first host here of the State of Aesthetics. Are you on your patio right now?
I am sitting in the sunroom of my house that's next to the patio.
Oh, fantastic. I look forward to seeing you in the element soon.
Yes.
So that we can catch back up in person. It has been really interesting for the society to have to connect in this way. And I think it's taught a lot of people a lot of things, but there are mainstays, whether it's masks, whether it's picking and choosing if you're actually going to go to the gym or you're going to go to the hair salon, or there's a lot of things that the consumer behavior will change. And I feel like we had just started to learn we had just started to predict consumer behavior. We are no fear to challenge, not here in America, not anywhere else in the world, and not in aesthetics. That is the spirit that we encompass. So anyway, I greatly appreciate you being my guest today. I hope that you guys have a lovely evening. We'll see you in the future.
Austin, right back at you. Just remember, everybody wants to look as good as they can. That will all come back. That's not going to go away. Tell Susie we said hello, and take care of those babies. And I will talk to you soon.
Absolutely. In good health. Thanks, Dr. Tittle.
You as well.
All right, man.
Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, there you have it. Dr. Ben Tittle on the State of Aesthetics podcast. I'm your host, Austin Podolsky, sponsored by Synergy Med Sales and Aesthetic Imaging. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to be doing this every Friday, 4:30, virtual aesthetic happy hour here live on Instagram. You can also check the podcast on the podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, etc. I'm sure that there were a ton of questions that came on. I didn't get a chance to get to all of those. I actually have the camera pretty far back off here. I've got a camera over here, got our recording equipment over here. I don't have somebody moderating it because my wife is tracing my two crazy and beautiful children, and I need to go take care of them and cook them some steaks. It is Friday night, ladies and gentlemen. Pour yourself a glass of whatever is nice and on ice, and we will talk to you next Friday for the virtual happy hour in aesthetics. Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in to the State of Aesthetics podcast. Again, I've been your host, Austin Podolsky. Stay tuned for our next guests to learn more tools, tips, and tricks on how to navigate the space of aesthetics.